Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to Endwell Live, where each week we're having a conversation with a special guest about how in this truly unprecedented time of crisis, we can collectively find community and best support those facing serious illness, support caregivers and families. I'm Shoshana Ungerleider. I'm a physician and the founder of Endwell, where we're focused on making the end of life a part of life. And I hope you're all safe and healthy. And if not healthy, I hope that you're on the mend. We're coming to you today to find community in one another and to support our physical and our emotional health through this virtual conversation. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Matt Richtel, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He's a fiction and a nonfiction writer. And we're going to talk for about 20 minutes and then open it up to you, our audience. And if you're joining us live today, please say hello in the comments below and tell us where you're from. And please ask questions throughout the conversation, throughout the show. Be sure to also share this link on your own page so that people can join the conversation with us. And I want to thank the Cambia Health Foundation and the Tauber Family Foundation for their support of this program. So hi, Matt.
Hello.
How are you? Hi, how are you doing? And tell us where you're joining us from today.
Yeah, I guess the word I'd used right now is blessed. The family's healthy, and that's a lot to ask for these days. I'm in San Francisco, in my home office. It's a beautiful day, and I will say that just in opening that I noticed the slides that you opened with, and apparently I used to shave. So. That is no longer so. But thank you for having me, and I echo your sentiments. I hope everyone's doing well and feeling blessed.
Yeah. So Matt, you have been with the New York Times for a long time. My first question for you is, the mainstream media has been really important in keeping the public informed about COVID-19. So thank you. It takes expertise, it seems like, in analyzing data and science to stay on top of all this stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about how journalists go about reporting on a situation? I mean, we've never had anything like this, but that requires so much expertise, but it's also in a constant state of flux.
Yeah, I mean, you have the one word. Can I boil this down to one word? And the word is science. And actually, I would just say broadly, there will be some good things that come out of this devastating period. And one of them is a new relationship with science, both journalistically, although that has been very strong, but culturally and across the country. And so what we are doing is talking to the people who understand the field on a day-to-day basis, those collecting the data, but also those who understand how epidemics unfold and how infectious disease works, because there is so much that is unanswered. We have to rely on those who have studied these patterns over time.
Yep, so important. And it seems, even for me, as a physician who's trained in science, and clearly we've never seen anything like this before, but it's challenging for me to even stay up on what's happening day to day, hour to hour. And so I just have to say, I mean, I think, the media has done, a wonderful job in many ways of making sure that the American public, understands what's happening and to provide the best possible recommendations going forward. So,
and Shoshana, just to echo that, when I interview doctors around the country, they'll say, I thank this newspaper or that newspaper for providing some collection of information. I would just say to those who think the burden on the newspapers is heavy, it is so. We understand the gravity of getting it right, because people, including doctors, are making decisions based on how discerning our information is. So it better be right.
Yep, you got it. I think that's absolutely right. You've been tracking the clusters of high mortality or high death rates at some nursing homes and long-term care facilities since the start of this. What can we be doing based on your research to better protect our most vulnerable older adults out there?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a short-term answer and a long-term answer, Shoshana. The short-term answer is we're in a real pickle. And to underscore for people why this is so devastating for nursing homes requires a little bit of backdrop about nursing homes. They care for the elderly and infirm who are the most vulnerable. But they have also taken on in recent years a greater burden of healthcare as the system has changed. So what is happening nationally is that our population is aging. People are kept alive longer through remarkable technologies like ventilators and antibiotics. And as those people are kept alive, they are being moved from hospitals, trying to keep costs down, into nursing homes. And that has changed the nature of nursing homes from what we might have imagined in the older days where they were more like retirement communities. I just want to pause there and say, Shoshana, does that context make sense?
Absolutely. These people are sicker and they're living longer in that
Yes.
state. So yes.
Yes. And so for the moment, the reason we're in a pickle is we have not really prepared for a kind of illness like this that preys on this population in settings that have been to some extent ill-equipped to deal with these highly, highly vulnerable patients during an epidemic. So in the short term, what we have to do is get the equipment there, get the training done, ask the hard questions, and be prepared to take the hard steps inside these facilities the way those steps are taken at hospitals. I want to also take a moment to say what the long-term answer is. And this is a cup half full moment. If we can seize on it, we can gain on the future by recognizing that this population needs better care under tougher circumstances.
Yep, absolutely right. If you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Matt Richtel from the New York Times. And please, as we're talking, share this conversation on your own page and keep asking questions in the comment section. So Matt, I understand when you started writing your book, An Elegant Defense, about the new science of the immune system, you thought you were writing about how one day we'd find a path to immortality, but that's not what happened. Can you tell us a bit about where you ended up?
Yeah, can I share a brief story of a miracle that set me writing that book?
Absolutely.
I think you and I have talked about this before, but I want to tell all of you out there a story of a guy named Jason. He was my good buddy growing up in Colorado. He was kind of Mr. Everything, all-state baseball and all-state basketball, and so good looking. He got all the girls. He was just that guy. And I always clearly looked up to him and appreciated him as a buddy. And in his 40s, he got cancer. And it was a kind of cancer, Shoshana, that you're supposed to be able to cure, a lymphoma that gets cured 90% of the time with radiation and chemotherapy. But in his case, it didn't work. And so come a few years into treatment, he had 15 pounds of tumor in his back, doubling every few weeks. And his doctor said to him, exactly, Jason, I love you, but it's time to go home and die. Thus starts what appears to be a miracle to me, Shoshana. He goes home to die. At the last second, he asks for this immunotherapy treatment. And you doubtless are familiar with immunotherapy. It's aimed at tinkering with the immune system. It's off label. It's not ready for market. He takes it. 2 weeks later, 9 toes into the grave, his girlfriend wakes him and says, Jason, get out of bed. Your tumors have disappeared.
Wow.
Startling, right?
Yeah.
Like Lazarus, can we start the whole thing over? I mispronounced it. Like Lazarus, he rises from the grave. I pick up my pen and I say, oh my God, what is the immune system such that we're tinkering with it at the molecular level? And does this mean we've gotten to the holy grail point where we can live forever? That was what I thought I was going to learn. And to everybody out there, I want to say, I learned remarkably enough the opposite. I learned that what we can extend life and quality of life through remarkable technologies, but in fact, the immune system, for all its effectiveness in preserving life for a great period, actually is involved in complicit in killing us And it does so that the species can evolve and make room for the next individual. It's too long of a science to get into here, but it's all in the book, and it boggled my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an amazing book and so interesting to think about how the evolving science and knowledge around the immune system is such a young field, right? I mean, it's only been, even when I was in medical school, I don't know, now 10 years ago, we didn't know near as much as we know now about how all this stuff works and what it means in the context of sort of human evolution potentially. So it's really fascinating, and I think a lot of the things that are coming up with COVID around the immune response are particularly interesting and pertinent in terms of what you wrote about with the book.
You
So
can make a strong case, Shoshana, that COVID is an immune system story at its core.
yeah.
But before I go on with that, I should ask you, because as we discussed before we went on, I can off-road like nobody's business, and I don't want to take this in directions you don't want to go. So let
Yeah.
me yield to you before I ramble about that.
Well, no, I mean, I think you're right. We only have a handful of minutes, and so I'll hop on to my next question here for you. I think we could go a number of different directions, but I want to talk about sort of culturally how we've been very afraid as a society to talk about death, almost as if by doing so it would cancel out the joy and beauty of being alive. Yet I think we find ourselves in a moment within COVID where maybe a better relationship with our own mortality might make things a bit less terrifying right now. So how do we reconcile our fear of death with our love of life?
Yeah, so just to put this in the context, Jason lived a year, and my wife and I, she's a doctor, and I were at his bedside when he passed a year later. He got another year and some real joy during that period. But as I said, I came to understand that the immune system needs us to move along for the sake of the species. And as I sat at Jason's bedside, I was forced to hold two truths that seemed contradictory at the same time. One is that I was devastated by his passing. I came to love him. I did love him. But I also came, and so I understood that I want every second I can have, Shoshana, for my kids, for my family, for my own joy. But I also understood in that moment that Jason needed to let go. And when he died, Shoshana, he waited until his mother had left the room. And then he passed. And I think that he had been holding on for the sake of others. And so the two truths that I started to try to hold on to were, I want to grasp all of life that I can and be grateful for these technologies that give us one more year. But I want to be able to let go in a way that makes the end less wrenching, that makes the end more embracing of the inevitable nature of this journey that will not be beaten by technology, and it will not be beaten by hope, and it will not be beaten by prayer. And these two truths can be held simultaneously. And unfortunately, I have to tell you, Shoshana, that is no small thing or easy thing to do. And we all must wrestle with how to do it. I just know it's the right truths to hold, but I can't tell you I've figured out how to do that yet.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's right. I think all of those things can be true at once, and it's sort of how we think about that and keep it in perspective throughout life. And I just feel like that's so palpable right now. This sort of understanding that tomorrow is never a given, COVID or not, right?
May I say a thought that's popped in my head more than once during this? I'm 53 years old, so I'm close to the area where, my lungs could be in real trouble. And I've thought I could go. It's possible. I could leave my kids, and how devastated I would be. And to hold those truths simultaneously, in those moments, I've tried to remind myself, oh my God, have I been lucky to this point? Should something terrible happen, many blessings have accrued thus far.
Mm.
And I've tried to remind myself that just so death feels less scary. And maybe that's what it requires at some point. That self-acceptance of all the wonder that's happened to that point.
Yeah, if you're just joining us, I'm talking to Matt Richtel from the New York Times. Please share this conversation on your page so others can join in and ask us questions in the comment section below as we're talking. So Matt, switching gears a little bit, you've thought and written a whole lot about our growing dependence on screens,
Yeah.
on computers, tablets, phones, TV even. Do you have concerns about how much we're using our screens right now to stay connected while sheltering in place?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really hard question because for the moment I would answer no. Were it not for these things, we would not talk to our grandparents, and our children talk to their grandparents or their parents. We would not have telemedicine. I mean, it's hard to be critical in this moment, and yet there are multiple moments during this crisis as well. I can see our dependence that is so compulsive on our devices interfering with our ability to be alone with ourselves, to be with our families, and therefore to be creative, to think more thoroughly through problems. I would say, so let me just pause there and say this moment is complicated the same way that you would say you don't often want to shelter in place. It is a moment of crisis. But if you were to ask me outside of this environment, Shoshana, I would tell you chapter and verse that we are far too dependent on our devices for a whole bunch of reasons that affect our own intellect, our own creativity, our own culture, our own politics, and how we interact with one another.
Amen to that. Absolutely. You know, I can say I was chatting with my sister yesterday, and she just said, "I just don't know what I'm going to do. My 4 and 6-year-olds, you know, never watch TV and iPads, until now. So how are we going to?" And now they're, that's just they're stuck inside, and what they're doing. Of course, everybody's doing that right now, and that's totally fine. But the question is, what does that mean down the road, for them, and how do we think about this in the context of returning, hopefully, to a more normal cadence of life? It's really important just to be, not that there's a good answer, but to be talking about it and thinking about it.
Shoshana, I say this respectfully. I know you. There is a good answer. It's just a hard answer. And the good answer is that first we have to understand why these things are so compelling. And then we have to be as deliberate in keeping them in check as we would drugs and alcohol and anything else that has diminishing returns at some point. And I just would say this about why they're so compelling. They provide novelty at a pace and at a speed, and they provide stimulation at a pace and at a speed that plays to some of our deepest neurological and primitive yearnings. And I would say the very same thing about junk food. It has its place and time, and food that runs a spectrum has a place and time. And we have learned to have a better relationship with food where we pick our spots. We know what's good for us. We know what's gluttonous. We know what's problematic. We must learn the same with our devices. I make this humble suggestion. During this period, at least in our household, we have had the opportunity to have more nights with our families that are quiet. I would humbly propose that in the future, a family like ours picks a night or two that are distinctive family nights where there's no technology and we are in touch with each other, because we're not going to be able to do it all the time. Maybe pick a night or two.
I like that. My husband and I started doing that on Fridays for Shabbat, actually. But it's hard to stick with. You kind of, especially now, you lose track of the day, and it's like, wow, 2 weeks have gone by. We're all a little disoriented. But I love that idea. Now we have some questions from viewers here, And if you're just tuning in, this is Matt Richtel from the New York Times I've been talking with. Please ask your questions, make comments below, and we will get those answered here. This first one is from Jessica. Matt, you mentioned that you're a father. How have you
Yes.
spoken to your children about this crisis? And then how do you expose them to the media and daily realities? As a mother, I'm curious, she says.
Yeah, Jessica, thank you for the question. And I don't know if Jessica can type in, but I'm curious how old your child or children are. Ours are 11 and 9, and we have a little bit of a benefit in that my wife is a doctor. And we have taken we have long since held that the truth is good. And when you use, sometimes it helps to explain things in really clear clinical ways, in part because it takes the edge off it and makes it less scary. And I'll give you an example. When the question comes up around sex, my wife will describe it in such clinical terms that the children get bored. So in this case, I'm not saying we're trying to bore them, but we tell them in all seriousness the facts, and it sort of makes it less hyperbolic. And we've been very frank with them about it, and truth oftentimes just makes it less exaggerated. Think of it this way: go less Hollywood Tonight and more nature science publication.
I like that. Yeah, in fact, Jessica's daughter is 9. So
It's
right
not.
in that wheelhouse. You know, one question, sort of a general question for you: is there some learning that you hope that individuals, that our culture or our healthcare system that we haven't already touched on, takes forward from this time? Something that we'll all kind of grow from this experience.
Yeah, well, honestly, Shoshana, I think some of it comes to what you do. I think we have to have a different relationship with death, and I'll speak here, we as a nation. It's a very wrenching relationship we have right now, and that would cut across epidemic, individual circumstance. It is both a financial, spiritual, and emotional toll that we are taking on ourselves. Um, More specifically, I think the nursing home question is a very significant one. And then finally, I think we have to understand our immune systems better, because I think this is at its core an immune system story. What I mean by that is the more informed we are about this part of our body, the better we can make decisions about how much to expose ourselves and to what. And it's a longer conversation, but I would just say the science has been embryonic, but now it's coming forward. I spent a year with Tony Fauci. He's an immunologist at his core for my book. Now, of course, the Tony Fauci, and
Yeah.
science is yielding around the immunology question. And the better we come to understand it, the more we will understand our bodies and their relationship to disease.
Well, gosh, I have a question now. You spent a year with Tony Fauci. I didn't realize that. Is he
Yes.
really as cool as he seems on TV?
I mean, he's like Steph Curry and LeBron James, and I don't have modern actor references, Brad Pitt, and
Yeah.
because the other day I said to the kids that for this creativity book I'm working on, I'm going to interview Bono, and they said, "Is that a boy or a girl?" So that's how out of it I am. Come on,
Oh
Dad,
my
interview
goodness.
Lizzo. But what is remarkable about Fauci, and I would say this of the leading thinkers in science, is their capacity to stay within the bounds of truth, while expressing the most important and dire pieces of information. And it goes back to that analogy I drew ham-fistedly between Entertainment Tonight and a nature journal. Tony Fauci, the Tony Fauci, can walk that line, and it is his understanding of the immune system that informed this book I wrote at its core. I can't say enough about him and people like him who are helping us at a societal level.
My goodness, we have so much to thank him for at this point. That's incredible. Well, so I think we'll wrap up the conversation here. Folks out there, we want to hear from you. How has coronavirus changed how you feel about and prepare for serious illness, for caregiving, your own thinking about mortality? Please go to endwellproject.org/stories to share your story with us. And tune in next week for Dr. Bon Ku, who is an emergency medicine physician working on the front lines of the COVID pandemic. He's also the founder of the Innovative Health Design Lab at Sidney Kimmel Medical College at Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia, and the co-author of Health Design Thinking. It should be a great conversation. I want to say thank you so much, Matt, for joining us today. For everything that you do, really, really wonderful. And to everybody for joining us and tuning in live. It's communities and conversations like this that really give me hope in these tough times. And another thank you to the Cambia Health Foundation and the Tauber Family Foundation for their support. And stay safe and well out there, everybody.